Billy Napier is ready to go full hash sling and slasher once again on the recruiting trail.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And like I said, Billy Napier getting ready to go full hash sling and slasher again, which if you don't get the reference, one, you're either too old or too young. Just saying, SpongeBob. I'm just saying, it's on you if you don't get the reference. But the hash slinging slasher had a spatula as a hand, so flipping, because we are talking about all of the Florida Gators flip targets in the sense of not just who they're recruiting, but this is who they have visits set up with, or who they had visits last week. Who they had those visits with, or who they currently have visits scheduled with that are currently committed elsewhere. You will hear about a lot of these kids again later this week when we go through the full visit list, because this weekend is expected to be a pretty heavy visit weekend. But we're going to start with wide receiver Darryon Williams, and he's listed as an athlete, but Florida is recruiting him as a wide receiver. Billy Gonzalez is his primary recruiter right now. He is a 4-star everywhere except for 24/7, where he's a 3-star, which, again, just to revisit this, I'm really not caring about the player rankings. I'll acknowledge them and I'll explain what the rankings are or where they are, but I really don't care about these recruiting rankings. I think that the sites that set these rankings just collectively have become less about actually recruiting or less about actual rankings and more about, well, were we right on these guys that hit? And that's it. Like, it's not about just giving an honest opinion. It's about, I think, giving higher rankings to people with higher boom potential, which is fine, but it's politics about, well, did they go to this camp? Dallas Wilson was a 5-star forever. Comes to Florida, and it's like, actually, he's a 4-star because he didn't go to this camp. That's it. I'm going to go on this rant probably a trillion times over the next few months, but it is what it is. Darryon Williams is currently committed to Florida State, and this recruitment feels very Tavares Dice to me. And by that, I mean, in the 2025 class, Tavares Dice was committed to Auburn early on, but even with his early commit to Auburn, it felt like through multiple points in the recruitment, and I do think that this one will be pretty similar. It felt like through multiple points of Tavares Dice's recruitment, where it's like, yeah, he committed to Auburn a while back, and he's been committed to Auburn, and he's still in contact with Auburn. But at certain points, it felt more likely that Tavares Dice was leaning towards Florida, or that it was even. And here's the thing. Recruitments that are going to be long recruitments, so by that I mean when someone commits fairly early on in the process, when those kind of recruitments feel this early in the cycle, because again, we're in May still. And so in May, if it feels relatively even, or if it feels like a different team has the lead, I think it's really tough to hold on to those commitments. Like, I think that when we're talking in May about, oh yeah, it might be leaning Florida or trending Florida, when we're talking about that in May, I feel like by the time we get to signing day, it's probably going to be Florida. And that's how I feel about Darryon Williams. It was how I felt about Tavares Dice oftentimes when we spoke about it. And so my stance on those recruitments is that's really hard to hold on. Darryon Williams committed a year ago. He committed in April 2024. And so I feel like that was a really early commitment. Florida State has gone through a lot, and honestly, props to him for not decommitting during that 2-10 season. I do think that might be a little bit of a testament to how he or how they've recruited him. But it's just really tough to hold on to a commitment that long when it's been a year and we're at the point where we're like, hey, Florida might actually be favored here. It's tough for me to think that's going to stick. And this is one that even if a flip happens, like let's say he flips mid-June, I'm not locking anything in. Like this is a season where realistically, like I know where my expectations are for Florida. I think I know where a lot of Florida Gators fans' expectations are for Florida. But realistically, this is a season that could not go the way they were anticipating. And so does the kid want to flip and then go through that and then come back? I don't know. And so we could look at it that way. Florida State could be trash again, or they could have a great year, great bounce back year. I don't think that's going to happen, but they could have a great bounce back year, and they can lock in Darryon Williams. So this is one where even if a flip happens, I'm not counting anything before it's signed, right? Tight end Carson Sneed. This one was a recent addition to the visit list. 3-star on On3 and 24/7, a 4-star on Rivals and ESPN. Currently committed to Tennessee. I don't think that Carson Sneed is a priority target here. I think that, and for two reasons. One, I think that there are better inline options in this 2026 class. And also, look, I think he's a good player, but I don't think he has the same athletic traits that they're really prioritizing on this team. With their recruiting, I don't think he has those same athletic traits that tells me he'd be a priority. He has the athletic, and this isn't a knock. I think he's a good player, but this is one of those players where it's like, I think athletic trait wise, he's more likely to be someone that they put on the back burner. And if it comes to it late in the cycle and they need to commit, they can go get him. Or if they feel like, even if it's still the summer and they feel like they've missed out on the top inline options, then I think they can revisit that. But just athletic traits wise, I don't think he's a bad athlete, but he doesn't have those elite traits that they've been looking at for any position really. But inline tight end here, which I know inline tight end is the less athletic tight end option, but they still prioritize athletic traits. Offensive tackle, Javon Cooper, 4-star everywhere except 24/7, where he's a 3-star. He's a Syracuse commit, but he's from the state of Florida. And the feeling is, from people I've spoken to, and the way that they've explained it to me, is that if Florida basically just puts that pressure on, which is something that Florida has not done much under Billy Napier. They are notorious for going, yeah, take your time, go ahead, no rush, make the right decision for you, all that, which is a fair approach. I'm not bashing it. But if Florida applies that pressure, I've been told that they think they'd be able to actually pull this flip off if they put that pressure on. But this could also be a thing where they're like, all right, well, we're going to put that pressure on later in the cycle. Just keep building the relationship here, and then we'll apply that pressure. Could be the way they go about things. Not saying that's a bad approach. Just that's the approach that I've been told they're taking right now. We are going to talk about more flip targets in the trenches when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all of my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege with no spaces for half off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free. Visit the podcast and on YouTube. And we're going to keep talking about these flip targets the entire show today. And the first one, or the next one that we're talking about, is interior offensive lineman Chris Booker. He is a 4-star on 3 and Rivals. He is a 3-star on 24/7 and ESPN. And he is an Alabama commit from the state of Georgia. And I'm going to be honest with everybody here because that's what we like to do, right? We're honest here. We're trying to be educational and trying to be entertaining. But honesty is the best policy, as always. I think that of all the players we're talking about today, this is one of the least likely, if not the least likely, that we're going to talk about. And look, never say never, of course, but I don't think Florida is the most likely team to get the flip here for Chris Booker. I think the most likely team to get the flip would be Georgia. But honestly, I don't know if he doesn't feel like his recruitment doesn't feel like he's looking to flip. If that makes sense. From what I've heard, he just doesn't seem like he's like looking for his way out. He seems like he's pretty solid with Alabama. So I don't know if he flips. But I do think if he does, Georgia's the most likely spot. Then there's Hezekiah Harris, the edge rusher, 4-star everywhere. 4-star on all the sites. One of the only unanimous 4-stars that we have talking about today, or one of the only unanimous blue chips that we're talking about today. But look, I'm always down for my team to do battle with Auburn over a recruit. Florida and Auburn don't play often, but since Hugh Freeze has been hired there, Florida and Auburn have just constantly battled for recruits. This seems like just another one of those recruitments where it's going to be Florida and Auburn fighting here. And whenever Auburn's involved, you can know one thing. NIL matters. And Florida is pushing hard on Hezekiah Harris. Outside of the NIL realm, I'm not saying that they're not pushing hard with NIL. Frankly, to be honest here, I don't know what the NIL numbers look like for Hezekiah Harris or basically any recruit. That's not a thing I try to get involved with. And usually I'll wait for a kid to sign somewhere before I even ask what that's like, just because it's a constantly changing thing. And so I try not to waste my time really concerning myself with the NIL here. I just know that NIL does matter to Hezekiah Harris, which fair. Yeah, you've earned that. You're a hell of a ball player. You're a 4-star, so you're a blue chip at an edge premium position. NIL should be a factor for him. And so it is. And so that tells me a couple things. One, Auburn's going to be in this until the end. And two, it's going to take until signing day. When kids aren't necessarily private, that NIL matters. That can tell you that, hey, anything could happen here up until they put pen to paper. So not super concerned with whether the flip happens, if it happens at all. Not super concerned with it happening anytime soon, because even if it does, it's going to be one that goes down to the wire. Then we have 2 linebackers that we're going to talk about today. First off is Karen Mayok. He is a 4-star on On3 and Rivals, a 3-star on 24/7 and ESPN. He is currently committed to Florida State, but I think that throughout this season, like summer, sure, but throughout the season, I think that Karen Mayok is going to be just an in-state battle. I think all 3 of the big 3 here will be involved in this battle. I think that, a lot of it's going to come down to just how the season goes and what's important to him. Like, let's say Miami with their new DC hire doesn't pan out so much. Are they going to be in it if Florida State doesn't pan out? Like, let's say, just hypothetically, Florida has the best defense in the state. How much does that matter with early playing time? Because it's probably not going to be available too much at linebacker next year for Florida. So how much does that matter with early playing time or just being scheme fit, properly coached up, whatever it may be? There's a lot that goes into it. And I think that when we're talking about an in-state battle, we don't so much talk about, is this like having that advantage of just being in-state, like we've talked about with other players, and we will talk about with other players as well today. So I think that that's going to be real back and forth, and I think a lot of it will come down to how all 3 of the big 3 look on the field this year. Because if either of the ACC teams have bad defenses again, I feel like that should mark them off in terms of all right, they're just not good defensively, and they're not going to be good defensively. But anything can happen, especially if you could sell early playing time. The other linebacker to talk about is Izayia Williams, 4-star everywhere. He's someone that I'm torn on his just evaluation. I feel like he might be someone who long-term is better suited to the edge. Just he had great size, athleticism, burst. Like he's a great athlete. And that's why I'm like, all right, well, maybe he's better suited to the edge. He's got the size to do it. He's got the length to do it. He's got the athletic ability to do it. Maybe he winds up there. Or maybe he just ends up being an overhang linebacker and like he's to the edge, but not necessarily as an edge rusher. Could be a lot there. Izayia Williams is an Ole Miss commit. For now, he is on his 5th commitment. And so look, when we talk about Izayia Williams, like I don't bring up the 5th commitment thing to be a D-bag about it. Like I bring up the fifth commitment thing because one, it tells you that we have no idea how this recruitment's going to go. He's at his 5th commitment before his senior year. We have no idea how that recruitment's going to go. Not a single person on the planet knows how it's going to go either. Okay, so I bring up the 5th commitment thing just to say this has been a very fickle recruitment, and it could continue to be that. He could stick with Ole Miss. I doubt it. I'm being completely honest. I doubt it, but he could. He's committed to what? Florida State, Florida, Louisville, Syracuse, and now Ole Miss, if I'm not mistaken. This could go any direction, right? I mean, so I'm not super concerned about any of it, to be honest. This is going to be one that drags out. He can flip back to Florida by the time this episode even comes out. It's late Sunday night right now. Like, he can flip to Florida anytime he wants right now. And I'm still going to look there and I'm going to say, all right, well, I'll wait. Like, I'll wait until he signs because this one could be spotty. So I think I bring up the 5th commitment thing not to bash him, not to say he's unreliable, not to do any of that I do see on social media. Like, I see people go, oh, I don't want to recruit him. I don't want to recruit him anymore if he's going to be. I don't care about that. That's recruiting now. He's just really leaning into it. But recruiting, you have to deal with things like that. So I don't care too much about that. I understand saying it's fickle and all that. But for me, I just wouldn't want to put a ton of effort in actively and say, yeah, we'll give you this NIL figure if you're someone who's likely to flip. That's just not what I care about. I'll wait. I think he's a hell of a ball player. When we get closer to the season or into the season, then sure. I'll be like, hey, you got to tighten up here. Come be a Gator. Like, I'm absolutely fine with that. I think he's a hell of a ball player. He's got a very high ceiling. It's just about actually putting it together. And right now, there's that recruitment stuff that is frustrating. But also, he's a kid going through. I mean, his representation said, yeah, when he committed to Ole Miss, he didn't tell us he was going to do it. He just did it. To me, that tells you that you're dealing with someone who is not approaching this as a business and is approaching this as I'm having fun with this process. Let him have fun with the process. As long as when it's time to tighten up, you tighten up. And so that's how I think we have to approach that one with Izayia Williams. We are going to flip to the secondary, or not flip, but we're going to move back to the secondary to wrap up today's show on Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we're talking about 3 DBs that are currently committed elsewhere that Florida is recruiting and has visits set up with. Again, that's the important part here. We are only every player we've talked about today or every player we are going to talk about today either has visits scheduled with Florida or had a visit with Florida already, an official visit. We're only talking officials. We're not talking unofficials right now. So either took an official visit already or has an official visit scheduled, not just like, oh, they're going to. They have it scheduled. And the next one is cornerback CJ Brona. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. CJ Brona, he's a 4-star everywhere, one of the few unanimous 4-stars that we've talked about today. And he's currently committed to Nebraska. And this one feels like it's Nebraska trying to hold off, or trying to hold on, I guess, trying to hold Florida and Florida State off. Florida and Florida State are going into battle for the in-state kid. And I think it's very important to acknowledge the in-state part because CJ Brona was an early commit to Nebraska, but is now getting that in-state love. And for a lot of Florida kids, I think that matters with their recruitment of just getting that in-state love from any of the big three, ideally all of the big three, right? But for any of the big three. And I will say as well with CJ Brona, I don't think he's going to stick to Nebraska. I'm not saying he's going to be a Gator, but I am going to say that we've talked 4 years I've been covering the Florida Gators, 4 years that I've been on Locked On. We've talked about recruitment and how important it is to have these relationships that you have with players and coaches. And Tony White was Nebraska's defensive coordinator when CJ Brona committed during the season. Now, Tony White is at Florida State. And so that relationship matters. And I think that for CJ, he's in a spot probably where he's like, all right, I've committed to Nebraska. Do I stick with my commitment to the university? Do I stick with my commitment to the defensive coordinator? Or do I just entertain everything? Because guess what? I committed to the university and the DC, and the DC didn't commit to me. The DC didn't commit to that university. Like, that's the thing I don't think enough people acknowledge, where they go, okay, well, he's either going to stick with his initial commitment or he's going to follow that coach. And he can go, well, actually, that kind of proves to me that neither of them were committed to each other. How can I expect them to be committed to me? Because again, Tony White, congratulations, you recruited him, you got the commitment. But if you leave, I feel like you do kind of, and yes, it's a business and you have to do whatever's best for your career. Absolutely. But I do think that it opens the conversation again for, well, if you're willing to leave, even after all this time, after all this, you sold me this dream at Nebraska, and you're able to just leave like that, even if you're still recruiting me, I do feel like that there are quite a few players who would be not hurt or not mad or not offended, but they can kind of look at that and say, all right, well, you weren't really committed to Nebraska. Were you really committed to me? And just make them question things. And I do think that's very fair. And I don't think enough people acknowledge that for kids in this recruitment process that is crazier than it's ever been. But also just there's so many people that are in kids' ears that it gets to be a lot. Next is corner Brody Jennings, 4-star on On3 and Rivals, 3-star on 24/7 on ESPN, a trend that we've seen quite a bit. He is a Michigan commit right now, and Florida. So he's been committed to Michigan. Florida had momentum for the flip. Not saying that they were likely to get it, but they had momentum building their way before Will Harris went to Miami, which at this point was almost 3.5 months ago. It's kind of crazy. But before Will Harris went to Miami, they've been in contact since then. As in Florida with Brody Jennings, have been in contact since then. They've been able to rebuild that relationship there between the university and the player. And him being an in-state kid is a huge advantage. Like, I think Brody Jennings will wind up flipping. I don't know if it'll be Florida or Miami. I think those are the two most likely options. Obviously, I mentioned the relationship with Will Harris, who is now at Miami, and that Florida has rebuilt that relationship with Brody Jennings. But him being an in-state kid, I think is a huge advantage. I think for every school, every in-state respectable program, every in-state Power 4 program, it is a big advantage to have a kid, commit early to an out-of-state school that's far away. We've seen it happen back-to-back years now where kids from Georgia commit to USC and they don't stick. They don't even make it through the summer before they flip, because that's a far place to go and rebuild or to go and strengthen that relationship. Whereas Brody Jennings, for example, could take unofficials to Florida, Florida State, Miami every week. He could have a different Power 4 in-state school he's taking officials to. Michigan, that's not easy to do. That's not easy to schedule, and it's not easy to set up. So I think that there's a lot more in-state visit opportunities for kids, and I think a player like Brody Jennings makes it hard to stick to Michigan. Also, go ahead, visit during a November game and tell me that you want to stay there. Stuff. Last player we're talking about is safety Keon Jones. He's a 3-star everywhere except for Rivals. He's a 4-star, which that's the only player we have that set up with. 3 stars everywhere except the 4-star in Rivals. He is a Georgia commit right now, and he's a recent Georgia commit. So I will say that because he's a recent Georgia commit, I don't expect this to be a flip that happens soon. Just because I think that kids want to avoid getting that tag of, oh, he's fickle. Like, I think a lot of kids want to avoid that, rightfully so, because you see what they say on social media about an Izayia Williams or another kid who flips around, where they keep making fun of him, and you want to avoid being that guy. And so while Keon Jones committed last month to Georgia, I think that because of that, it's likely going to drag out a bit. Kids don't flip that quick anymore. It's rare if they do. But I will say that for Keon Jones, Florida has the last visit here, the last official visit. Okay, he's got his, if I'm not mistaken, it's Georgia this week, Florida in 2 weeks. And I think that a lot of us recognize, hey, that last visit, usually pretty big indicator, or at least you get the recency bias there with the recruitment. And hey, by the time that visit happens, he'd have been committed to Georgia for 2 months, and maybe there's a change. However, he would also only be 2 weeks removed from his Georgia visit, and so maybe that's kind of re-strengthened that relationship. It could go either way, honestly. It's going to be one that's probably going to drag out. I do think that his ranking is going to rise because, well, it's a Florida-Georgia primarily battle right now. And that's usually an indicator that this is not a pure 3-star player, except for, again, being the 4-star on Rivals. Not usually a Florida-Georgia thing to be battling over a 3-star, right? Usually, that recruiting ranking will rise because, well, if those schools are recruiting you to play DB, you're probably a pretty good DB. Just a shot in the dark, crazy statement to make, right? If Florida and Georgia want you to play DB, you're probably pretty damn good at it. So I think that his ranking will rise. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever listen to podcasts and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.